Wonderful. Okay. So I think we'll just dive into it. And then because I'm on a laptop, I can't see many of the comments very well. So if anybody, if you can help me with any of the questions that people, if there's any burning questions people want answered, I saw a couple questions about engaging teams and that sort of thing. I'll definitely deal with that. But it'd be helpful if there's any questions that I need to delve in while I've got the board up. So and then I'll towards the end I'll pop the board off and we can just focus on the questions. So
yes, sounds great.
All right, so I'm coming to all of you by from Sonoma, California. I'm at an in-person conference, but I've really been looking forward to this. I'm a longtime Miro user and have done a lot of pre-COVID, done a lot of design thinking workshops. But I've been focused on issues related to the future of work for quite some time. I was actually trained as a career counselor when I was 19 years old. I've worn many, many different hats in Silicon Valley and beyond in the tech industry. But I keep coming back again and again to issues that help each of us to be able to understand how we can develop what I call a next mindset, skill set, and tool set. And along comes a pandemic, and suddenly so many of us are operating on a distributed basis. So I want to give a framing around just how we might think about this brave new world of work, how we can have a different lens on what it is that we do as increasingly distributed teams, and then some of the techniques that we found, some of the insights that we found that some people have found helpful in the practical management of all that. And then I'm happy to talk about specific use cases if you've got ones that you'd love to be able to dive into. So just briefly, just to give you my current portfolio of work. I'm the author of a book called The Next Rules of Work. And so I'll give you a little bit of the framing from that book, see if that's helpful. I'm the chair for the future of work with Singularity University, which is a global group of experts on everything from quantum computing to next generation medicine. And I get to pull out of these amazing brains insights around the future of work, the future of learning, and the future of the organization. I've got 9 courses on LinkedIn Learning, courses like Learning Mindset, Learning Agility, and Leading Change, with a total of over 1.2 million learners. I've got a small but mighty consulting company called Charette, where we spend a lot of time with organizations around the world, helping them to be able to get their arms around this brave new world of work. And then finally, we've got a small software company built from the knowledge of a book called What Color is Your Parachute, that helps individuals to be able to navigate career change. So that gives me a range of different lenses about the ways that each of us as individuals are going through these really seismic changes in our industries, our organizations, our work, and our lives. And what I've found is often helpful to people is to have sort of a framing for the ways that we continually navigate continuous change. As a matter of fact, the subtitle of my book is The Mindset, Skill Set, and Tool Set to lead your organization through times of uncertainty. And if there's anything I think we can characterize these times, the past couple of years, it's that there's been a lot of uncertainty. As a matter of fact, back in March of 2020, if you remember that far back, I wrote an article for Techonomy.com, which just happens to be the conference that I'm at, called The Great Reset. Welcome to the Great Reset. And what my group Charette had done is we looked back at previous resets like the Great Recession and realized they have sort of 3 phases. There's this falling off the cliff phase of complete uncertainty. There's this middle phase of sort of turning the lights on and off again. And then there's this final phase of hopefully not just building back, but as we like to say in the US, building back better. And so that really is an opportunity for each of us. We are here at that inflection point where we are co-creating the next rules of work. And if you lead a team, if you guide other people in their work, if you're a sole contributor, each of us has had to go through a pretty seismic shift in the way that we think about work and the way that we collaborate around work. And I tend to say, well, the three legs of the stool for doing that, for navigating those changes, are mindset, skill set, and tool set. So what do I mean by that? So I wave a magic wand, and you and I are standing at the foot of a mountain. And I've given you all the skill set of a mountain climber, but you look at the top of the mountain and you say, wow, that looks a little too high. So you have all the skill set, but none of the mindset. So I wave my magic wand again, and now I've given you all the mindset of a mountain climber, but you've never climbed a mountain before. But you take one step, two step, you encounter problems, you solve them, what I call just in time and just in context. And eventually you're standing at the top of the mountain and looking down and saying to yourself, well, how hard was that? So as I'm fond of saying, we all need a 21st century skill set, and I'll tell you what I think that needs to be going forward. But mindset eats skill set for lunch. If you and your team believe that you can solve the problem you're just about to walk into the meeting or onto the Zoom call to solve, you are going to be absolutely right if you think you can solve it, and you're going to be absolutely right if you think you can't solve it. So mindset is critical as you think about how you and your teams are continually approaching new problems. But if you're climbing a mountain and you encounter an ice wall, I don't care how good your mindset or skill set is, you need a good pickaxe, you need good boots. And so the tool set empowers you. It's a set of techniques and technologies that allow you to be able to leverage that mindset and that 21st century skill set. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what each of the opportunities for mindset, for skill set, and for tool set are. But right now I want to dive into sort of the framing that I used, which is that this is basically a brave new world of distributed teams. All right. So, and here's some pictures maybe I hope that are helpful to you in thinking about that. I think of the old model of the organization as being kind of like a box. There was abundance outside the box, as Peter Diamandis, the co-founder of Singularity University, is fond of saying. He's got a book called Abundance. But there's scarcity inside the box. There were only so many jobs. And but then even pre-COVID, there were all these different use cases for work, not just traditional employees, but part-time, remote, contractors, subcontractors, consultants, and so on. And that model just can't fit in a box. Organizations are starting to have more and more flexible borders, boundaries, where there's lots of different workers that are all contributing value to the organization's stakeholders. So a picture I think can be helpful to have in your mind is this is not a workforce and it's not a network. It's what I call a work net. It's hard to tell exactly where the edges of the organization begin and end. If you look at Google, depending upon where things are in the macroeconomic conditions, Google, about 50% of all the workers for Google are contractors. The gig platform Upwork has about 2,000 people that work for the company, but 75% of them are contractors that work on the platform, some of whom have been working for different forms of the organization for over 15 years. And so this is a picture I think to hold in our minds is that we're going to increasingly be joining teams, defining the problem we need to solve, defining our roles, and defining all the processes we're going to go through, the techniques and technologies that will help us to be able to solve those problems, and then move on to the next one. And this will increasingly look like the soft walls of organizations. We will have lots of different use cases for work. So that's one way to be thinking about now in this brave new world of distributed work. But what about teams? So what is a teams? Well, there's research by Rachel Zombeck at the Blum Center, and she said, well, I think a team is kind of three things. It's people who are committed to a common purpose. They're interdependent, and that requires coordinated effort. They hold each other mutually accountable for the results that they're generating. Any of you that use OKRs, you know exactly where we're going with this. And then I've added a fourth, and that's you have to be able to dynamically bind around problems. As you and the team continually encounter novel problems, you've got to be able to continually understand what those problems are, deconstruct them, figure out whose superpowers can be applied to what part of the problem on the team, And then you've got to be able to execute and deliver that value and go on to the next. Well, if we're trying to understand how work has changed so dramatically, here's what a framing that I use. And I call it, this is the 5 W's: what, when, where, who, and how. So the what of work basically is problem solving and doing projects. There's lots of work that is not just projects. There's lots of work that is just sort of the same thing over and over again, whether you're waiting on a table or, often balancing the books. But there's lots of different phases for how we are solving problems. We might be co-creating, we might be creating, might be designing, and so on. The when of work, well, that used to be just 9 to 5 or 5 days a week for a lot of organizations. And now we understand in a world of distributed work that we actually have time that we're optimized for. The where of work, that used to be just the workplace, just the cubicle you would have the horrible commute to. And then we realized, well, no, there's actually lots of different contexts for where we can do our work and do our best work. Who used to be just our coworkers, the people in the cubicles next to us. And now we know there's lots of different ways we can be dynamically binding with others around problems. And then finally, the roles, the how. You might be a team member, but increasingly, I don't use the word supervisor or manager. I call it a team guide. And you might be shifting continually depending upon the kind of project that you're working on and what your role might be. So think of this as a constantly shifting set of contexts. And I'm going to try real hard to make sure that this works with Mirror. So you might be co-creating in the morning in your regular workplace with your coworkers, and you're actually guiding that team. And then you might be working alone, creating in the afternoon in your home as a team member. And so this is a constantly shifting context for work. We call it a flow of work. And this is one of the ways to be thinking about now how to engage your teams. How can you continually empower the team to be able to make decisions based on where you are in projects, to be able to do no-look passes to each other so that the projects continue to move forward, and how you can embrace flexible work and help the team to be able to continually shift context and on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, look forward and say, well, we need to be here doing this at that time, but we can be doing something completely different at another time. So that's one way to think of what I call the 5 W's, is to think of that as an intentional process that you as a team member or as a team guide are continually helping the team to be able to decide on an ongoing basis. You look at the policies of Salesforce or, Twitter before Mr. Musk purchased it, but offered the offices are open. You can come in if you want to, but you, the team, you decide, you figure it out. Well, if you're going to shift the team to this kind of much more dynamic and flexible work, then you've got to change the role of the person who guides the team. I don't use the word supervisor or manager or even leader very much. I use the phrase team guide. The old model was you had to be the person with the best answers, but the team guide is the one that has the best questions. The old model is you had to be the one that was continually solving problems. And I think the next model is to be the one who empowers others to be those problem solvers. And then rather than being the one who is continually trying to find the next problem to solve, the team members tell you the roadblocks that need to be removed, the way you need more resources for a project, the ways that you need to be able to navigate policies inside and outside the organization, the way you need to bring in new collaborators so that you can have psychological diversity and psychological safety. We have to shift that role of the team guide to be able to empower teams to be more effective. So that's sort of the framing for distributed. It's going to be more of this very flexible set of, what I call the work net, flexible context for the way people work together. Teams, we have to change the way we even think about the composition of teams and especially how we guide teams. And then I said, okay, so let's talk about mindset, skill set, and tool set. And we could spend a lot of time geeking out on each one of these, but I'm going to take each one in turn. So There's lots of different mindsets you can have. At Singularity University, we talk about an abundance mindset. We talk about a moonshot mindset. But if there's one that we suggest you would start with, it's a growth mindset. It's that every individual in the organization has a commitment to continual growth. And they do that as a team sport. One of my clients, Novartis, they have a mindset that everybody in the organization has a learning path. The CEO talks all the time about the latest courses that he took, so that everybody is continually growing and changing. And within your organization, it's really critical to choose, what do you think are the kinds of mindsets, the kind of culture that you want to encourage? I mentioned earlier a 21st century skill set. There's lots of different skills. You have dozens and dozens of skills. But if we're going to channel our human energy to be able to create value for the organization stakeholders, I think of 4 what I call flex skills usable in a range of situations, are critical. We all need to become problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. Problem solvers because that's what we do. That's why people pay us. It doesn't matter whether it's a dirty floor or a complex piece of software to be designed. We're problem solvers. We need to be adaptive because we live in a world of exponential change. If a virus has taught us anything, it's that change can happen overnight. Creative because this is what keeps us ahead of robots and software. And then empathy. That's another uniquely human skill. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, is fond of saying he thinks it's the source of all human innovation, is that uniquely human skill. So this just happens to spell pace in English. And I talk a lot about a paced skill set in my book, The Next Rules of Work. And then here we are, we're using a tool to be able to communicate, to be able to structure information. I sort of break the tool set into techniques and technologies. You've used Miro boards before for design thinking. Maybe you use them for Kanban, but whatever you might use it for Agile, whatever kinds of techniques you are using to be able to solve problems as an individual or as a team. These are empowering techniques that help each of us to be able to dynamically bind around problems. And then techniques often shift into technologies. And so that's why we have Miro boards, is we're able to instantiate the processes we go through so that we support them with technology so that we can continually be more adaptive and more creative as we do our problem solving. So I think I'm going to wrap up there. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. I'd love to just sort of wrap up a little bit with some of the closing thoughts around some of the ideas in the book, and just suggest some follow up in terms of things to read. So for some reason it's looking a little fuzzy on my end. So there we go, pops in. So in the Next Rules of Work, I actually have a framework for all the various approaches I was just talking about, and a lot of exercises and examples to be able to use in your organization. And then if you are managing a distributed team, part of a distributed team, my friend John O'Dwyn has a marvelous book that I call the Bible for distributed teams. That is highly recommended if you're trying to figure out how you can best manage these resources and guide your team in a world of increasingly distributed work. So I'm going to stop sharing and would love to dive into any questions. Yeah, Eleanor, I think you're muted.
How about now? Better? Good. Okay. One question we have is about the difference between a growth mindset and that moonshot mindset that you speak about.
Excellent. Okay. So I don't use the word culture very much. Mindset is essentially the way that each of us as humans, the way we approach situations and other people. And it's the way we prepare ourselves. There's some unique ways that things going on the back of our brain. So think of if you could wave a magic wand and you could encourage what you think in your organization needs to be the common mindset, what would that be? What we've seen in organizations around the world is that because we live in a world of exponential change, sure, there are certain jobs that just don't change all that much, but the shelf life of information in many jobs has really shortened significantly. And each of us is also a growing and changing human being. And so a growth mindset, I think of as sort of like the baseline platform. That's the way that each of us as individuals, then as teams, then as organizations will continually be able to solve new problems. But sometimes those problems are really big. And so I've done projects, my company Charette, we've done projects with Google since 2005. And Sergey Brin, the co-founder, is fond of saying, I want you to shoot for Mars, because if you miss, you'll still hit the moon. And if you just shoot for next door, you might not even get out of the current building, your current building. So moonshot thinking is you've just done your design thinking work on Miro, and then some annoying voice in the meeting, as you think you're all done, says, wait a minute, how can we 10x this? How can we do this 10 times faster? How can we reach 10 times more people? How can we make it 10 times cheaper? How can we make it 10 times more effective for people? That whole 10x mindset is a moonshot. It's how do you continually open the aperture, because you will envision solutions you wouldn't have thought of if you just focus on what's in front of you and just try to deliver the small part of that problem solving process. So we recommend that you actually do this in your meetings, and be that annoying voice at the end of the meeting that says, wait a minute, let's go back to the whiteboard and let's see if we can open the aperture in some way to be able to amplify this project.
Well, and building off of that, we have another question around success stories from organizations or individuals that you've seen who have addressed and changed their mindset.
Absolutely. So there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is that really big companies don't really change in the middle, like the core of the organization, very much, because they're very successful. And why would you change? You're doing fine. But in a world of exponential change, that's often not, that doesn't necessarily prepare you for the next big, what's called a black swan event. So my friend John Hagel has a series of books. He used to run Deloitte's Center for the Edge. And actually what he maintains is, well, do it on the edge, like do it on new projects or new companies or new acquisitions, because you're not going to be changing the center. So that's one mindset. That's one approach. And it's there's no question it's easier that way. However, there was a study done by the Institute for Corporate Performance, I4CP. So if you just Google I4CP, you'll find this. And what they found was that bad news, 85% of all the mindset changes in organizations fail. All the cultural shifts, 85% fail. Good news, 15% succeed. And there are 18 steps, which I also have in my book, but 18 steps that you can follow that actually they've been proven over and over again to help change mindset. It's just that you must have the commitment of people who lead the organization. You must have the kind of access to people throughout the organization to help to encourage that kind of mindset shift. Those are the circumstances under which I4CP shows that model and the steps to go through. But if you don't have that, if you instead have influence over a team or a small part of the organization or a division, then that's an edge strategy. That's often go ahead and do what you can do in your part of the organization to be able to make a change.
Yeah, I think that those examples are so helpful to hear and to know some of the odds of being successful and where you feel like you can be within that 15%. Right. I know we have just about 2 minutes left in our session. So as we're winding down, I'd love to invite everybody to the feedback tab where you could just quickly share a answer one question for us in a quick poll. But with that, Gary, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
So the one W I didn't cover, we just didn't have time for, is why, the why of work. And I strongly encourage everybody to go through the process of understanding what is their own North Star or Southern Cross. Like, what is it that guides you, that pulls you, the kinds of problems you love to solve in your work, or whatever it is that you see as being that sort of through path to what you want to continue to do in your work. And I think that's something you should encourage your team to do. You should encourage the sharing of those motivations within your team so that everybody understands what each other's superpowers are, but also understands what their motivations are, where they feel, the kinds of problems that they love to solve, or the direction that they see in their own career. And that is a tremendous opportunity now in the post-pandemic world, because we've opened the aperture to actually embracing the whole human being in this brave new world of work.
I love that. Like the concept of a personal North Star and being allowed and empowered to bring that to work.
Right.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Gary. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. The recording of this session will be available by tomorrow. And of course, you've got the board. And thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Take care, folks. Be well.